can, in our view, at that period apply for a tribunal review, which would be at the Administrative Appeals Tribunal or the Refugee Review Tribunal or the Migration Review Tribunal. And then if that was unfair in a process, seek review by a court. Our view is to have people out by 12 months. We don't want anyone, if the committee's recommendations are working well, there won't be anyone in there.
Might I make a comment?
Please.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you. It was also important, and this is one of the aspects, I think, of the report, that it will be transparent, and it will be not just transparent to the people who are detained, it will also be a transparent process to the wider Australian community. Now, the Chair's already said there is a balance here. This is a very balanced report about the duty of care that we owe to the Australian people, and also the human rights element regarding the people who will have their liberty deprived. We felt that by the time any detainee may still be there at the 12-month level, that the DIAC review, the Ombudsman's review and advice to the Minister will have isolated some kind of significant and ongoing concern that the person should be still there. That means, though, when that person knows that at 12 months they can still have an independent tribunal review, that puts some transparency into the whole process that has not been there before. And then if the person is still not satisfied with that independent review, they can still have access to a judicial review on the process. And if the judicial review then decides that that person should remain in detention, that puts that person then in line with every other person who has their liberty deprived in Australia, that they are there because of a court, an independent court of law has decided that that should be so. So it is important that the recommendations in this report indicate clearly, transparently, the fairness that's available to not just the people in detention, but also that the people of Australia understand that the duty of care that this government has to them for their security is also protected.
Ms Vale, could I take you back to Stage 1 Villawood and ask you what your concerns were over that?
Oh, again, the nature of the detention in Stage 1, I think that was something that all the committee agreed. Many of the detention centres had been significantly upgraded in a very, very personal and friendly manner, if I can say, especially the removal of razor wire and wire netting. And there's certainly some improvements that I believe that are on the plans for Villawood, and they really can't come quickly enough.
Yeah, it is quite depressing to see all of the razor wire and people being crowded on top of each other. I know that when they have periods when there are not a lot of people there, they try and keep people separate. But to have people who have a mixture of backgrounds all with each other is not ideal, and it's a depressing place, very much like a prison.
And there are concerns with some of the Section 501 detainees who may have been released from prison with criminal records and or past criminal behaviour. The rest of the detainees who are there must be protected from people such as they, and so there needs to be some measure of proper security, but it's the matter of degree.
So is the committee sort of compromising Australia's national security by recommending that detainees be given bridging visas after 90 days?
No, I don't see how that could actually happen when the department themselves have to be assured that the person does not pose an unacceptable and ongoing risk to the Australian community.
And first of all, you have to remember that in the high 80s is the percentage of people that are released because they have no risk to the community. So we're talking about a smaller group of people. And then you have to also remember too that the committee received very good evidence from ASIO that the Director General said that most people's cases were dealt with by them in the 90-day period. So again, we're looking at smaller and smaller groups of people, each of whom have to be dealt with justly, and the Ombudsman then comes in at 6 months. If people are still there, and the merit and judicial review at 12 months. people can still be kept in if there is a risk assessment that they are a risk to the Australian community. But that's again, the onus is on getting people out rather than keeping people in.
Is that a culture that you would describe that has existed until now, and is that something that you think is beginning to change, that culture?
I don't mean to be political with the Deputy Chair here supporting a non-partisan report, but I think the change in government led to the change in this culture. I mean, there was a very clear difference that was enunciated by Mr Rudd and Senator Evans before they were elected, and elections lead to changes in political culture. And I think, to the government's great credit, he's released a number of people who've been in long-term detention or got them out of the country. Australians don't want, at their expense, people being in long-term immigration detention, apart from the injustice of it. So it's both rational and fair. I think there has been a definite change, and this is he gave us these criteria because he wanted us in a non-partisan way to give him specifics of how an open and transparent system ought to look. Now, I hope that they take all of our recommendations, including stopping charging people these ridiculous amounts for being incarcerated, ministers don't necessarily take on board everything that worthy committees recommend to them.
Could I just add a little to that question, Chair, and with due respect to the great spirit and the bipartisanship of this report, there were changes that were made by the previous government in 2005 when we actually had the Ombudsman do its 2-yearly review. I think we've all learned a lot in retrospect, and getting back to your particular question about the security assessment risks of people, of the tens of thousands of asylum seekers that we have received here in Australia, only 2 have been shown to have had adverse security reports, and one of those was subsequently withdrawn. So I think that's a very, very significant record that we must take into account.
So how does the committee feel it should handle detainees with criminal histories? How should they consider them for detention in the future?
Well, it all depends. If those people with criminal histories, and if you're talking about Section 502,
501.
Some 501 detainees, people who have already done their, if you like, their jail sentence and their time in detention. The department and the Ombudsman would actually have to consider the kind of reporting conditions that is imposed on that particular person. Say it's parole conditions. Many people who have done their term in prison are out on parole conditions within the wider Australian community. That's how our system works. So we're really just the department and the Ombudsman and indeed the Minister subsequently will be taking all those particular provisions into account.
Can I just come back to your question about the culture of immigration detention? I was very pleased to note that the shadow immigration spokesman, I think on the news this morning, has said that she's a recent member of this committee. Basically made the point that Deputy Chair Danna Vale made, and that the previous government was going in a more humane direction, and that she endorsed the findings of the report. If that's a change in the political culture of the previous government, now opposition, that's good. This report, I think, drags the debate back to the political centre, where most Australian people think we should be judging the issue of immigration detention.